returning to the present sanctuary, the power of quiet release. There comes a moment in life when you realize that nothing outside of you is actually breaking you. It is the way you are holding on. You are holding on to people who cannot meet you where you are. You are holding on to situations that have already taught you their lesson. You are holding on to expectations that quietly drain your peace every single day. Buddhism teaches that happiness is not something you chase or earn. It is something you protect. And the moment you learn how to detach without becoming cold, how to let go without becoming empty, and how to stand still without needing anyone's approval, your life begins to feel lighter, calmer, and finally free one. Detachment begins when you stop needing others to validate your worth. One of the deepest and most hidden roots of human suffering is the silent desire to be approved of by others. Most people do not even realize how much of their emotional pain comes from this need. You want people to understand your intentions, appreciate your efforts, respect your boundaries, and choose you with the same sincerity you give them. When that validation does not come, the mind quietly turns against itself. You begin to question your value. You replay conversations. You wonder what you did wrong. You assume that if someone does not see your worth, then maybe you do not have enough of it. Buddhism teaches that this craving for approval is a form of attachment, and attachment always leads to suffering. When your happiness depends on how others see you, your peace becomes fragile. Other people's opinions are unstable because people themselves are unstable. Their moods change. Their priorities change. Their understanding is limited by their own fears, wounds, and expectations. When you allow their reactions to define you, you hand over control of your emotional state to something you can never fully manage. Detachment does not mean becoming cold or indifferent. It does not mean you stop caring about people or relationships. It means you stop making your self-worth dependent on external confirmation. You still love with sincerity. You still treat people with respect and kindness. But you no longer chase appreciation or beg to be seen. You stop explaining yourself to those who are not listening. You stop shrinking yourself to fit into spaces where you are not valued. When you detach from the need for validation, something powerful happens inside you. Your sense of worth begins to settle within your own awareness. You recognize your effort even when no one applauds it. You honor your growth even when others do not notice it. Your confidence becomes quiet, stable, and deeply rooted. You no longer rise when praised or collapse when ignored. Praise becomes pleasant, not necessary. Criticism becomes information, not a wound. This inner shift makes your heart lighter because it is no longer constantly seeking approval. You stop feeling anxious about how you are perceived. You stop measuring yourself through other people's eyes. Your peace becomes self-sustaining because it comes from self-standing rather than external permission. Buddhism teaches that true freedom begins the moment you stop asking the world to tell you who you are. 2. Detach from people who only exist in your expectations, not in reality. A great deal of suffering comes not from people themselves, but from the image you create of them in your mind. You imagine how they should behave, how they should care, how they should understand you, and how they should show up for you. You expect emotional depth, consistency, loyalty, or sensitivity that may never have been part of who they truly are. When reality does not match this inner image, disappointment arises and the heart feels heavy. Buddhism teaches that attachment to expectations is attachment to illusion. The mind creates a version of people based on hope, desire, or past moments of kindness, then clings to that version while ignoring what is actually happening in the present. You wait for people to change. You excuse behavior that hurts you. You hold on to potential instead of truth. This creates endless inner conflict because you are emotionally connected to something that does not exist. Detachment begins when you learn to see people clearly without adding layers of expectation. This does not mean judging them harshly or labeling them as bad. It means accepting who they are right now, not who you wish they would become. When you stop expecting someone to give what they are not capable of giving, you stop setting yourself up for pain. You stop hoping in ways that drain your emotional energy. Letting go of expectations does not remove love from your heart, it removes illusion. You can still care deeply while no longer depending on someone to meet needs they cannot fulfill. You stop taking their limitations personally. You understand that their inability to show up for you is not always a reflection of your worth, but often a reflection of their own inner state. When you detach from expectations, relationships become lighter. You no longer feel constantly disappointed or emotionally tense. You stop waiting for people to finally understand you or treat you the way you believe they should. Instead, you choose peace over attachment. Buddhism teaches that freedom is not found in changing others, but in releasing the mental images that keep you bound to suffering. 3. Detach from situations without turning them into your identity. One of the most common causes of inner suffering is the habit of turning temporary situations into permanent definitions of who you are. When something goes wrong, the mind immediately personalizes it. A failure becomes proof that you are not good enough. A delay becomes evidence that life is against you. A difficult phase becomes a story that says something is wrong with you or your path. Buddhism teaches that suffering increases the moment you stop seeing events as experiences and start seeing them as identity. Life is constantly changing, yet the mind clings to moments as if they define everything. You face a problem, and instead of seeing it as something you are going through, you say, "This is my life now." You encounter uncertainty, and instead of observing it calmly, you assume it means you are lost or failing. This mental attachment makes situations feel heavier than they truly are, because you are no longer just facing difficulty, you are becoming it. Detachment begins when you learn to separate what is happening from who you are. A situation can be painful without being personal. A setback can be real without being permanent. Buddhism teaches mindful observation, which means watching events arise and pass without clinging to them. When you observe instead of identify, your inner space remains open and calm even when the outer world feels unstable. This does not mean ignoring emotions or pretending that difficulties do not matter. It means allowing feelings to exist without letting them define your entire sense of self. You feel sadness, but you do not become sadness. You experience uncertainty, but you do not lose your inner center. You face obstacles, but you do not label yourself as broken or defeated. When you detach from situations in this way, your resilience grows naturally. You respond instead of react. You act with clarity instead of fear. Problems still arise, but they no longer overwhelm your inner world. Buddhism teaches that peace is not the absence of difficulty, but the ability to move through difficulty without losing yourself. 4. Detach from the need to control outcomes and trust the flow of life. One of the most exhausting attachments the human mind carries is the need to control how life unfolds. You plan every detail, imagine every possible result, and silently demand that events follow a specific path so you can feel safe, successful, or at peace. When life does not move according to that plan, anxiety appears, frustration builds. The mind starts fighting reality instead of flowing with it. Buddhism teaches that much of our suffering comes not from what happens, but from our resistance to what happens. From a young age, you are taught that control equals security. If you work hard enough, think enough, worry enough, and prepare enough, then nothing should go wrong. But life does not function that way. People change, circumstances shift, opportunities arrive and disappear without warning. When you cling tightly to outcomes, every unexpected turn feels like a personal failure or a threat. You begin to live in constant tension, always trying to manage the future before it even arrives. Detachment begins when you understand that effort and control are not the same thing. Buddhism does not teach passivity or laziness. It teaches right effort without attachment. You still take action. You still show up with sincerity. You still do your best, but you release the obsession with how things must turn out. You stop tying your peace to specific results. You understand that outcomes are shaped by countless causes and conditions, many of which are beyond your control. When you are attached to outcomes, your mind never rests. Even during moments of success, fear remains because you are already worried about losing what you gained. Even during calm moments, anxiety whispers because you are anticipating what might go wrong next. Detachment from outcomes frees you from this endless cycle. You begin to experience each moment more fully because you are no longer mentally living in the future. Trusting the flow of life does not mean blind faith that everything will be easy. It means accepting that life has its own rhythm, and fighting against it only creates suffering. Buddhism teaches impermanence, the truth that everything changes. When you accept impermanence deeply, you stop demanding certainty from an uncertain world. You stop asking life to guarantee comfort before you allow yourself to feel calm. Detachment allows you to act from clarity rather than fear. Instead of making decisions driven by desperation to control results, you act with wisdom and presence. You focus on what you can do right now rather than obsessing over what should happen later. This shift brings a quiet confidence. You trust yourself to handle whatever comes rather than trying to prevent every possible difficulty. Many people believe that letting go of control means giving up. In reality, it is the opposite. Letting go of control gives you energy back. When you are no longer mentally rehearsing every outcome, your mind becomes spacious, creativity returns, intuition becomes clearer. You respond to situations as they unfold, instead of forcing them to match your expectations. Buddhism teaches that peace is not found in a perfect future, but in full presence with the present moment. When you detach from outcomes, you allow life to surprise you. Sometimes things work out better than you imagined. Sometimes they fall apart in ways that lead to deeper growth. Either way, your inner balance remains steady because it is no longer dependent on a single result. This form of detachment creates emotional maturity. You stop clinging to success as proof of your worth and stop fearing failure as evidence of weakness. You understand that both success and failure are teachers, not identities. You learn to bow to life rather than wrestle with it. In this surrender, not defeat but wisdom is born. When you truly detach from the need to control outcomes, you experience a profound inner relief. The constant pressure to manage everything dissolves. You begin to trust the unfolding of your life, not because you believe it will always be kind, but because you trust your ability to meet whatever arises with awareness and strength. Buddhism teaches that this trust is one of the deepest forms of freedom, a freedom that protects your happiness, even in uncertain times. 6. Detach from the expectation that life should always be gentle with you. One of the most subtle and painful attachments the human mind carries is the belief that life should always be kind, fair, and gentle if you are sincere, patient, and good-hearted. Deep inside, many people hold the quiet expectation that if they try their best, avoid hurting others, and live with honesty, life should reward them with ease. When hardship arrives instead, confusion and resentment appear. The mind asks why suffering is happening when you feel you did not deserve it. Buddhism teaches that this expectation is one of the hidden causes of emotional pain. Life is not designed to protect you from difficulty. Life is designed to teach you through experience. Joy and loss, comfort and discomfort, success and failure are all woven into the human journey. When you expect life to always be gentle, every challenge feels like a betrayal. Every setback feels unfair. Every delay feels personal. This expectation turns normal hardship into deep suffering because the mind is constantly arguing with reality instead of learning from it. Detachment begins when you release the idea that peace depends on a smooth path. Buddhism teaches acceptance, not as resignation but as wisdom. Acceptance means understanding that difficulty is not a sign that something is wrong with you or your life. It is a natural part of existence. When you stop expecting life to shield you from pain, you stop being shocked by struggle. You stop collapsing emotionally every time things do not go your way. This does not mean becoming pessimistic or hopeless. It means becoming emotionally grounded. You learn to meet life as it is, not as you wish it to be. When joy arrives, you receive it with gratitude without clinging to it. When hardship arrives, you face it without panic or self-pity. You understand that both will pass. This awareness creates inner stability because your happiness is no longer dependent on constant comfort. Many people suffer because they mentally resist pain. They tell themselves that they should not be struggling, that things should have worked out by now, or that others have it easier. This comparison deepens suffering and drains energy. Buddhism teaches that suffering less begins when you stop comparing your path to others and stop judging your experience as a mistake. Every life unfolds differently, shaped by causes and conditions you may never fully see. When you detach from the expectation of gentleness, resilience naturally grows. You stop interpreting difficulty as failure. You stop questioning your worth every time life tests you instead. You begin to trust your ability to endure, adapt, and grow. Hard moments no longer define you, they refine you. You become less afraid of discomfort because you know it cannot destroy your inner core. This form of detachment also brings emotional maturity. You stop demanding that people, situations, and outcomes protect you from discomfort. You take responsibility for your inner state rather than blaming life for not meeting your expectations. You learn to soothe yourself instead of waiting for circumstances to change. This inner strength creates a quiet confidence that does not depend on external stability. Buddhism teaches impermanence, the truth that everything changes. When you deeply understand impermanence, you stop expecting permanent comfort. You stop clinging to pleasant phases and stop fearing difficult ones. You learn to move with life rather than resist it. This movement is not weakness, it is harmony. Detaching from the expectation that life should always be gentle allows you to experience peace even in imperfect conditions. You stop asking life to prove its fairness before you allow yourself to be calm. You accept that struggle and beauty coexist. In this acceptance, the heart softens instead of hardening. You become compassionate towards yourself and others because you understand that everyone is carrying unseen challenges. When you finally let go of the belief that life owes you ease, something remarkable happens. You feel lighter. You stop fighting invisible battles with reality. You stop carrying anger toward the past and fear toward the future. You meet each moment with awareness rather than resistance. Buddhism teaches that this surrender is not giving up on happiness, but discovering a deeper happiness that no longer depends on life being gentle to exist. 7. Detachment is the highest form of self-respect and inner freedom. Many people misunderstand detachment. They believe it means withdrawal, coldness, or emotional distance. Buddhism teaches something far deeper and more compassionate. True detachment is not about closing your heart, it is about protecting it. It is about recognizing your own worth so clearly that you no longer sacrifice your peace just to be accepted, loved, or chosen. Detachment in its purest form is self-respect. For a long time, you may have been taught that being a good person means tolerating discomfort, ignoring your own needs, and enduring emotional pain for the sake of others. You may have believed that love requires self-abandonment, and that kindness means staying even when your peace is slowly disappearing. Buddhism gently challenges this belief. It teaches that when you repeatedly abandon yourself to keep others comfortable, suffering is inevitable. Detachment begins when you stop betraying yourself. You notice when something feels heavy, draining, or misaligned, and instead of forcing yourself to endure it, you step back with awareness. You understand that your inner peace is not something to be negotiated or traded. This is not selfishness, this is wisdom. You cannot pour from an empty cup, and you cannot live a calm and happy life while constantly ignoring your own inner signals. When you practice detachment, you stop chasing people who do not meet you with the same sincerity you offer. You stop forcing conversations that feel unnatural. You stop explaining your boundaries to those who repeatedly cross them. You stop shrinking yourself to maintain connection. This does not mean you stop loving. It means you stop losing yourself in the process of loving. Buddhism teaches that clinging is the root of suffering. When you cling to people, roles, identities, or outcomes, you create fear of loss. This fear quietly controls your behavior. You tolerate disrespect. You silence your truth. You accept emotional imbalance because you are afraid of being alone or misunderstood. Detachment dissolves this fear. When you know you can let go, nothing holds power over you. True detachment brings a profound sense of inner freedom. You no longer feel trapped by expectations or emotional obligations that drain you. You move through life with a quiet confidence, knowing that you can engage fully without becoming entangled. You enjoy connection without clinging to it. You accept change without resisting it. You remain grounded even when things shift or fall away. This form of detachment also transforms how you experience love. Love becomes spacious instead of suffocating. You allow people to come and go without gripping them tightly. You appreciate presence without demanding permanence. You care deeply without fear, because your sense of self is no longer dependent on who stays and who leaves. Buddhism teaches that love without attachment is the purest form of love because it is free from fear and expectation. As detachment deepens, emotional reactivity fades. Situations that once triggered anxiety, anger, or insecurity lose their intensity. You no longer feel the need to defend yourself constantly or prove your worth. You observe emotions arise and pass without identifying with them. This creates an inner stillness that remains untouched even when life becomes noisy. Detachment also brings clarity. When you are no longer emotionally tangled, you see situations and people more clearly. You make decisions based on wisdom rather than fear. You walk away from what harms you without drama or bitterness. You stay where there is mutual respect without clinging or desperation. Your choices become calm, deliberate, and aligned with your values. One of the greatest gifts of detachment is dignity. You no longer beg for attention, chase validation, or tolerate disrespect to avoid loneliness. You stand firmly in your own presence. You become comfortable with silence. You find peace in your own company. Buddhism teaches that when you are at ease with yourself, you attract healthier connections naturally without force or effort. Detachment does not make life empty, it makes life lighter. You still feel joy, sadness, love, and connection. But these emotions no longer control you. They flow through you without overwhelming you. You experience life fully without being consumed by it. This balance is the foundation of lasting happiness. When you finally understand detachment, you realize that peace was never something you needed to find outside. It was something you needed to stop giving away. Detachment is not the absence of care. It is the presence of wisdom. It is the moment you choose yourself without guilt, protect your inner world without apology, and walk through life with calm strength. Buddhism teaches that freedom is not found by holding tighter but by knowing when to gently let go. When you detach with awareness, you do not lose life, you gain clarity, you gain peace, you gain yourself. 8. Detach by learning to be at peace with impermanence and uncertainty. At the deepest level, all attachment is rooted in the fear of change. You suffer not only because things change, but because you secretly wish they would stay the same. You want people to remain consistent, emotions to remain stable, situations to remain safe, and life to remain predictable. Buddhism teaches that this desire for permanence in an impermanent world is one of the greatest causes of inner unrest. The mind clings because it fears what comes next. From the moment you are born, everything around you is changing. Bodies age, relationships evolve, roles shift, feelings rise and fall. Yet the mind resists this truth. It searches for certainty where none exists. It tries to freeze moments of happiness and rush past moments of discomfort. This resistance creates anxiety, because deep down you know nothing can truly be held forever. Detachment begins when you stop fighting impermanence and start understanding it. Buddhism does not ask you to deny attachment forcefully. It asks you to see clearly. When you truly see that everything changes, clinging loses its power. You stop demanding guarantees from life. You stop asking people to promise what they cannot promise. You stop needing the future to be predictable before allowing yourself to be calm. Many people believe that uncertainty is dangerous, but Buddhism teaches that uncertainty is natural. Life has always been uncertain. The illusion is believing it should not be. When you expect certainty, your mind stays tense, always preparing for loss, disappointment, or failure. When you accept uncertainty, your mind relaxes. You become flexible rather than fragile. Detaching from the need for certainty changes how you experience fear. Fear no longer dominates your decisions. You understand that fear often arises from imagined futures, not present realities. By grounding yourself in the present moment, you realize that right now you are breathing, aware, and alive. This realization brings calm even when the future is unclear. Impermanence also teaches gratitude. When you stop assuming things will last forever, you begin to appreciate them while they are here. You listen more deeply. You love more sincerely. You live more attentively. Detachment does not numb your heart, it sharpens your awareness. You enjoy life without trying to possess it. Buddhism teaches that clinging to permanence creates suffering when loss inevitably occurs. When you accept impermanence, loss still hurts, but it does not destroy you. You grieve without collapsing. You feel sadness without becoming lost in it. You honor what was without being trapped by what is no longer there. This is emotional maturity, not emotional coldness. Uncertainty also teaches humility. You realize that you cannot control everything and you no longer need to. This surrender is not weakness, it is relief. You stop exhausting yourself trying to predict every outcome. You trust that whatever arises, you will meet it with awareness and resilience. This trust becomes a quiet source of strength. As you detach from the need for permanence, your relationship with happiness transforms. Happiness is no longer something you chase or protect anxiously. It becomes something you experience fully and release gently. You stop fearing its end because you understand that endings are part of life's rhythm. This understanding allows joy to flow more freely through you. This level of detachment also brings compassion. When you understand impermanence, you stop demanding perfection from others. You recognize that people act from their own changing inner worlds. You become more forgiving, not because behavior does not matter, but because you see the human condition more clearly. Compassion grows naturally when expectations soften. Buddhism teaches that true peace comes from aligning with reality rather than resisting it. Impermanence is not an enemy. It is a teacher. It reminds you to live honestly, love gently, and let go gracefully. When you stop fearing change, life feels less threatening and more meaningful. At this stage of detachment, you no longer cling to identities, roles, or labels. You understand that who you are is also evolving. You allow yourself to grow without clinging to old versions of yourself. You forgive your past. You stop demanding that the future match your old expectations. You live with openness rather than rigidity. When you embrace impermanence and uncertainty, a deep calm settles within you. The constant mental struggle to secure control and preserve dissolves. You move through life with softness and strength at the same time. You are present without attachment, engaged without fear, and peaceful without needing certainty. Buddhism teaches that freedom is not found in making life predictable, but in becoming flexible enough to meet whatever life brings. Detachment at this level is quiet, profound, and deeply liberating. You no longer fear change because you understand that change is not taking life away from you, it is shaping you. In this understanding, happiness becomes steady, not because life is stable, but because you are. You stop clinging, you stop resisting, you stop running. You rest in awareness. This is the deepest protection of happiness, not through control but through acceptance. 9. Detach from the voice in your mind that constantly judges, replays, and doubts. At the deepest level, detachment is not only about letting go of people, situations, or expectations. It is about letting go of the endless inner commentary that quietly steals your peace. Most suffering does not come directly from what happens in life, but from how the mind reacts, interprets, and repeats those events internally. Buddhism teaches that the untrained mind becomes its own source of pain. Inside your mind, there is a voice that replays conversations, judges your past decisions, worries about the future, and questions your worth. This voice speaks constantly. It tells you what you should have said, what you should have done differently, and what might go wrong next. When you believe every thought it produces, you become trapped inside an endless loop of mental suffering. Detachment begins when you realize that you are not this voice. Thoughts arise, but they are not who you are. Emotions pass through you, but they do not define you. Buddhism teaches mindful awareness, which means observing the mind without becoming lost in it. When you step back and watch your thoughts instead of obeying them, their power weakens. The mind often speaks in extremes. It exaggerates mistakes and minimizes growth. It remembers pain more vividly than peace. It predicts failure more quickly than success. When you are attached to this voice, you live in constant tension even when nothing is actually wrong in the present moment. Detachment allows you to notice these patterns without fighting them. You may notice how the mind clings to the past, replaying moments of embarrassment, regret, or loss as if they are happening again. Each replay renews the pain. Buddhism teaches that the past exists only as memory in the present. When you detach from mental replay, you free yourself from suffering that no longer serves you. You learn to let the past rest instead of carrying it forward. The mind also clings to imagined futures. It creates scenarios of rejection, failure, or loss that have not happened. You worry about conversations that may never occur and outcomes that may never arrive. This attachment to imagined futures creates anxiety and fear. Detachment brings you back to now, where most of these fears do not exist. Letting go of the judging mind does not mean silencing it forcefully. It means no longer identifying with it. You hear the thought, but you do not follow it. You notice the emotion, but you do not become it. This creates space. In that space, calm naturally arises. Buddhism teaches that inner silence is not the absence of thought, but the absence of attachment to thought. When you stop feeding the mind stories with belief and resistance, they lose energy. Thoughts come and go like clouds, and you remain like the sky, untouched. As you detach from mental judgment, self-compassion grows. You stop attacking yourself for being human. You stop demanding perfection from yourself. You allow yourself to learn instead of punish. This gentleness creates deep inner healing because much suffering comes from self-criticism rather than external events. Detachment from the mind also transforms how you experience emotions. You feel sadness without drowning in it. You feel anger without becoming consumed by it. You feel fear without letting it control your actions. Emotions become signals rather than commands. This emotional balance creates inner stability. When you stop believing every thought, you begin to trust your deeper awareness. You listen more carefully. You act more intentionally. You respond to life rather than react impulsively. This clarity leads to wiser decisions and healthier boundaries. The mind will continue to speak, but you no longer have to obey it. You learn when to listen and when to let go. This discernment is one of the highest forms of freedom Buddhism offers. You become free not because life becomes quiet, but because your relationship with your mind changes over time. This detachment creates a profound inner peace. You are no longer at war with yourself. You are no longer constantly correcting, fixing, or judging your inner experience. You allow thoughts to pass, emotions to flow, and moments to unfold without resistance. Buddhism teaches that the mind can be a tool or a prison, depending on how you relate to it. When you detach, the mind becomes a servant rather than a master. You think when needed, you rest when possible. You remain present rather than lost. In this detachment, happiness becomes simple. It no longer depends on perfect thoughts or constant positivity. It arises naturally from inner quiet. You realize that peace was always available beneath the noise of the mind. When you detach from the voice that constantly judges, replays, and doubts, you return to yourself. You experience life directly rather than through mental filters. You become calm, not because everything is resolved, but because you are no longer fighting your own thoughts. This is the deepest form of detachment. Not running away from the world, but resting fully within it. Not silencing the mind, but no longer being controlled by it. In this stillness, happiness is protected not by effort, but by awareness. 10. Detach by returning to the present moment where peace has always been. At the deepest level of all Buddhist teachings, detachment leads you back to one simple truth. Peace does not live in the past, and it does not wait for you in the future. Peace exists only in the present moment. Most suffering continues not because life is unbearable, but because the mind is rarely here. It is constantly revisiting what has already happened, or racing ahead to what might happen next. Buddhism teaches that when the mind leaves the present moment, suffering quietly follows. You may notice how rarely you are fully present. While eating, your mind is thinking. While walking, your mind is planning. While resting, your mind is worrying. Even during moments of happiness, part of you is afraid it will end. This constant mental movement creates tension because you are never fully where your body is. Detachment begins when you stop chasing peace across time and learn to return to now. The present moment does not demand perfection. It does not ask you to fix your entire life. It does not require certainty about the future or resolution of the past. It simply asks for your awareness. When you gently bring your attention back to what is happening right now, something remarkable occurs. The nervous system relaxes, the mind slows, the heart softens. You realize that in this moment you are safe enough to breathe. Much of anxiety comes from living in imagined futures. Much of regret comes from living in remembered pasts. Buddhism teaches that both are mental constructions appearing in the present. When you detach from these constructions, you free yourself from suffering that does not actually exist right now. You are not denying reality. You are meeting it honestly. Detachment from time does not mean ignoring responsibilities or forgetting lessons. It means no longer mentally living anywhere except where life is actually happening. You still plan when planning is needed. You still reflect when reflection is useful. But you do not remain trapped there. You return to presence again and again, gently and patiently. The present moment is often quiet, and that quiet can feel uncomfortable. At first, the mind is used to noise. It is used to problems to solve and stories to repeat. When those fade, you may feel restless or unsure. Buddhism teaches that this discomfort is not danger, it is unfamiliarity. As you stay with presence, calm gradually replaces restlessness. Detachment becomes effortless. When you realize that you do not need to control the present moment for it to be peaceful, you simply need to stop resisting it. When you allow the moment to be as it is without labeling it as good or bad, peace naturally emerges. This peace is not excitement, it is steadiness. Living in the present moment transforms how you experience pain. Pain may still arise, but it does not spread unnecessarily. You experience it directly instead of mentally multiplying it through fear, memory, or anticipation. This reduces suffering significantly. You respond wisely rather than react automatically. Presence also transforms joy. When you are fully present, joy becomes richer and more grounded. You stop rushing through pleasant moments or worrying about their end. You experience them fully, then let them pass without clinging. This balance creates contentment rather than emotional highs and crashes. Detachment through presence teaches humility. You realize that this moment is enough. You stop demanding that life be different before you allow yourself to feel calm. You stop postponing peace until conditions improve. Buddhism teaches that waiting for the perfect moment is one of the most subtle forms of attachment. As you practice returning to the present moment again and again, detachment becomes natural. You detach not by force but by awareness. You notice when the mind wanders and gently bring it back. There is no self-judgment in this practice, only patience. Over time, presence becomes your home. No matter where you are or what is happening, you know how to return. This ability protects your happiness more than any external condition ever could. Situations change, people change, circumstances rise and fall, but the present moment is always available. Buddhism teaches that enlightenment is not found somewhere else, it is found here. When you stop searching for peace outside the present moment, you realize it was never missing. You were simply not looking in the right place. Detachment at its highest form is not withdrawal from life. It is full participation without resistance. You live fully, love sincerely, and act wisely while remaining rooted in now. This rootedness creates unshakable calm. When you return to the present moment, you stop living as a fragment of yourself. Mind and body reunite. Breath and awareness align. Life feels whole again. In this wholeness, happiness is not something you protect anxiously. It is something you rest within. This is the final teaching of detachment, not letting go of life, but letting go of everything that pulls you away from it. When you live here truly here, happiness no longer feels fragile. It becomes quiet, steady, and deeply human. Detachment is not about escaping the world. It is about learning how to live in it without constantly hurting yourself. Throughout these lessons, you have seen that suffering does not come from people, situations, or events alone. It comes from the way the mind clings, resists, expects, judges, and tries to control what was never meant to be controlled. Buddhism teaches that peace is not something you achieve by fixing everything outside of you. Peace arises naturally when you stop fighting reality and start understanding it. When you detach from the need for validation, you reclaim your worth. When you detach from expectations, you free your heart from disappointment. When you detach from outcomes, you release anxiety. When you detach from the judging mind, you return to inner silence. And when you detach from time itself, you arrive fully in the present moment where life is actually happening. Detachment does not make you less loving. It makes your love wiser. You care without clinging. You give without losing yourself. You stay without forcing. You leave without bitterness. Your relationships become calmer because they are no longer built on fear, dependency, or emotional hunger. You stop asking others to complete you. And in that wholeness, connection becomes more genuine as detachment deepens. You notice a quiet strength growing inside you. You are less reactive, less defensive, less shaken by what others say or do. Life still moves. Challenges still arise. Emotions still come and go, but they no longer pull you apart from the inside. You remain grounded, aware, and steady. Happiness in this way stops feeling fragile. It is no longer something you must protect desperately or chase endlessly. It becomes something that naturally exists when you stop giving it away. You realize that peace was never missing, it was only buried beneath attachment. Buddhism teaches that letting go is not losing, it is remembering who you are beneath fear, expectation, and mental noise. When you detach, you return to simplicity. You breathe more deeply. You live more honestly. You meet life as it is, not as you wish it to be. So detach gently, not with force, not with anger, but with understanding. Let go of what tightens your heart. Keep what allows you to breathe. Walk forward with less weight and more awareness. This is how you protect your happiness.